Imagine you are crushed shoulder to shoulder at the stone throat of the Hippodrome in Constantinople, AD 532. You come to breathe for a few hours, to drown your worries in speed and shouting. But you hear a chant that does not belong to any race. You see faces tilt upward like animals catching smoke. You feel the crowd tighten, because 2 men are supposed to die today, and the Empire cannot even hang them. The ropes snap. The bodies drop alive. The city takes that failure like a sign from God or like permission. You smell pitch before you see flame. Therefore you know this is not only sport anymore. It is judgment. You push closer because the Hippodrome always pulls people closer. You see banners, blue, green, colors that usually mean insult and fistfights. But today the colors smear into one moving mass because anger makes its own flag. You hear laughter, too sharp, too desperate, because failed execution tastes like prophecy in a hungry city. 2 condemned men cling to life. Therefore the crowd clings to the idea that fate breaks in their favor. You see the guards hesitate. They shove with shields, but their arms look tired. You feel a pulse under the shouting, a new rhythm that does not match the drums. Someone yells a demand, mercy, justice, anything. But the demand turns into one word, carved out of thousands of throats. Nika, conquer. The sound hits the stone and comes back doubled. You feel your own throat answer before your mind gives permission. Therefore the Hippodrome stops being a stadium and becomes a courtroom. You see the imperial box above, that high balcony where power watches the people like a hawk watches mice. But today the hawk looks small because the mice stand upright and roar. You hear rumors collide like carts in a narrow street. Justinian will bargain. Justinian will slaughter. Justinian will run to the sea. Someone swears the factions already choose a new emperor. Someone else swears the army already switches sides. You don't know what is true. But you feel the truth that matters. Bodies move, and once bodies move together, no single person steers. A shove. Another shove. You stumble, catch yourself on cold stones slick with sweat. You smell hot oil from food stalls mixing with the sour breath of fear. A man near you, bareheaded, eyes wide, points toward the gates where the condemned men disappear into confusion. You see hands reach, grabbing at anything, a belt, a stick, a broken plank. Therefore tools turn into weapons without ceremony. A crackle. You turn. You see a tongue of flame lick up a wooden awning outside the entrances. Someone carries a torch like a priest carries incense. You smell pitch and wool. Therefore fire arrives not as accident, but as decision. The crowd surges outward, spilling from the Hippodrome like water from a broken jar. You run because standing still means being trampled. You see sandals lost, cloaks torn, bracelets ripped away with skin. You feel elbows hammer your ribs. But you keep moving because the city suddenly belongs to speed. You cut into a street where shops press tight together. A shutter bursts open. You see a merchant scream, but the scream dissolves under the chant. A man kicks in a door and drags out spears meant for guards, clubs meant for dogs, knives meant for meat. He tosses them into the crowd like festival gifts. Therefore rebellion puts weapons into hands that never hold them before. You see the first official, some clerk, some taxman, pulled from a doorway. He raises his hands as if a gesture can stop a mob. But the mob answers with fists. You hear bone against stone. You feel your stomach tighten because this is not theater. It is a city turning on itself. The chant grows. Nika, Nika. It no longer means win a race. It means take the world. Therefore anything connected to the emperor becomes prey. You smell smoke thickening. You taste it already, bitter on the tongue like burnt coins. You run past a bathhouse where steam usually smells of soap and human bodies. Today it smells of panic and closed doors. Families shove inside churches. You see mothers drag children by the wrists hard enough to leave marks. You feel how faith becomes shelter when law dissolves. But even churches tremble because rumor says fire does not respect holy walls. You hear the name of Hagia Sophia tossed around like a threat. Some say it burns already. Some say it must burn because the city must cleanse itself. You don't know, but you feel the danger in how casually people speak of sacred things when rage takes the reins. The night does not bring calm. It brings glow. You see orange reflections on marble, dancing like demons on polished stone. You smell resin and paint and cedar beams surrendering. Therefore, every alley becomes a chimney. You wrap cloth over your mouth, but the cloth tastes like soot and saliva. You move like a rat in a burning granary, not because you love darkness, but because darkness gives a thin chance. You see looters with sacks, laughing as if the world resets to zero. You see others with sticks-searching faces, hunting officials by the cut of their robes. Therefore, the crowd splits into creatures of appetite and creatures of vengeance, and both are dangerous. Hunger arrives fast. You reach a bakery you know by smell, warm bread, yeast, safety. But you find a black shell, roof collapsed inward like a broken jaw. You smell char and ash where food should be. Therefore, your stomach learns what rebellion costs. You hear 3 versions of the same future in one breath. The emperor gives in. The emperor orders slaughter. The emperor flees tonight. No one proves anything. But every rumor moves feet. Therefore, rumor becomes a weapon sharper than steel. You drift toward the palace quarter because the crowd drifts there, drawn by the idea of ending something. You see the palace walls, high, hard, imperial, lit by firelight that does not belong there. You feel the air vibrate with shouted demands. But you also see hesitation. Guards stand in lines, but their eyes flick sideways, measuring the mass. Therefore, power wavers when it cannot count loyalty. A pause spreads like a stain. The shouting drops for a moment, and in that moment you hear whispers. The emperor considers fleeing by sea. You picture it without wanting to, boats, oars, darkness, a ruler sliding away like a thief. But you don't know if that image is real or bait. Therefore, you don't know if the city is about to be spared or abandoned. The factions, blue and green, usually slash each other in the streets for sport. You see old scars on men who wear one color, and you know the other color puts those scars there. But now those same men stand shoulder to shoulder. Therefore, the unity feels like a beast with 2 mouths finally deciding to bite the same throat. That unity births a name. Hypatius. You hear it first as a murmur, then as a chant braided into Nika. You do not see Hypatius yet, but you feel how crowds manufacture kings, not with law, but with hunger for a face to pin hope on. Therefore, a noble becomes a symbol before he becomes a ruler. You push through smoke toward a plaza where men argue loud enough to drown prayer. You see hands raised, not in worship, but in voting without ballots. Someone shouts that Hypatius has imperial blood. Someone shouts that blood is all that matters. Therefore, ancestry becomes a weapon. You hear the palace remains closed. The emperor remains unseen. That absence turns into fuel. If he hides, he fears. If he fears, he can fall. Therefore, the mob's confidence grows from the silence of the throne. You see the city's great spine, its main streets, clogged with bodies carrying stolen goods and makeshift spears. You feel the ground tremble under thousands of steps. But there is no single commander. Therefore, the movement feels unstoppable and blind at the same time. Water runs short. You reach a fountain and find it choked by people clawing for cups. You smell sweat so strong it turns metallic. You feel thirst scrape your throat like sandpaper. Therefore, patience dies quickly. Someone shoves. Someone falls. Another boot steps on fingers. Smoke turns your world into a tunnel. You see only a few paces ahead, silhouettes in gray. You hear coughing like drums. You taste soot with every breath. Therefore, even survival feels like swallowing a fire. A sudden cheer erupts somewhere ahead. You push toward it because humans chase noise and panic. You see a cluster of men lifting someone onto shoulders. A cloak flashes, fine cloth in a street of rags. Hypatius appears, but not like a conquering hero. He looks pinned by hands, carried like an offering. Therefore, the new emperor looks less like a ruler and more like a captive of his own supporters. Someone shoves a wreath toward him. Someone forces a gesture from him. You see his eyes flick side to side, measuring the beast he rides. You feel a chill because the crown looks like a collar. But the crowd does not care. Therefore, a coronation forms out of pressure, not consent. The mob turns back toward the Hippodrome because the Hippodrome is the city's heart, and hearts are where decisions feel official. You get swept along. You smell old horse dung under fresh ash. You hear the chant bounce between stone walls. Therefore, the stadium that once contains rivalry now contains revolution. Inside, the seats fill fast. You see people climbing like ants, packing every tier. You feel trapped already because the walls rise high and the exits look small. But the crowd roars, confident in numbers. Therefore, caution gets buried under noise. You look up toward the imperial box again. Every face around you searches that same place. Is Justinian there? Or is the throne empty? You see flickers of movement behind curtains, but smoke blurs everything. Therefore certainty dies and imagination replaces it. Hypatia stands somewhere below, pushed forward, turned in circles so all can see him. The crowd wants a single image to worship, but he wobbles under hands that grip too tightly. Therefore the savior looks like someone drowning on a sea of palms. The chant swells into madness. Nika. It rolls like thunder. You feel it in your ribs. You taste spit thrown by shouting mouths. But beneath it you hear something else, something wrong. It begins as a distant rhythm. Not clapping. Not stamping. Boots. You freeze for half a breath because sandals make a different sound. Organized feet strike stone in a pattern that does not care about cheers. Therefore fear arrives before you even see steel. You twist toward an entrance. The gates there look like dark mouths. You see shadows fill them. Then you see armor, hard, disciplined lines. Shields lock. Spears angle. The men move as a single body. Therefore the empire shows its teeth. Names ripple through the crowd, but names do not matter. What matters is motion. You see soldiers pour in like water through a breach, but it is water made of iron. You hear the thud of shields, like doors slamming in a storm. You smell oiled leather and sweat under metal. Therefore, this is not a negotiation. For a heartbeat, the mob does not understand. People shout louder, as if volume stops blades. The front ranks surge toward the soldiers, believing numbers become armor. But the soldiers do not step back. Therefore, the first collision comes like a wall meeting a wave. You are close enough to see eyes change. A man in front of you wears a grin 1 second, drunk on the idea of victory. Then he sees spear points lower. His grin collapses into panic. Therefore, courage reveals itself as borrowed time. The spears drive forward. Not wildly, methodically. You hear the wet punch of metal entering flesh. You see a body fold in half like cloth. Blood sprays in small arcs, dark and smoky air. You feel heat on your face that is not fire, human warmth spilling out. Therefore, the Hippodrome becomes a killing bowl. Someone screams Nika one last time, but the scream breaks into coughing as bodies crush together. You try to step back, but there is no back. There are only bodies behind, bodies beside, bodies pressing. Therefore, the crowd becomes its own prison. You fight for air. Your tongue sticks to your teeth from smoke and panic. You taste iron, blood from someone's split lip smearing your mouth as the crush forces faces together. You feel ribs bend under pressure. Therefore, survival becomes a contest against suffocation, not against soldiers. You stumble and your foot lands on something soft that should never be soft on stone. You look down and see a hand, fingers splayed, nails broken. You jerk away, but the press of bodies drags your boot back onto it. Therefore, even the ground turns into a wound. Hands grab your ankles. Not in malice, desperation. Someone below tries to climb using your legs as ladder rungs. You kick, but guilt flashes hot because the kick lands on a shoulder, maybe a face. Therefore, morality becomes impossible in a human stampede. The soldiers push inward, slicing the crowd into smaller pockets. You see shields slam people sideways. You hear bones crack under the edge of bronze. The smell becomes sweat, blood, iron, and trampled garlic from someone's spilled lunch. Therefore, the ordinary collides with the horrific in one breath. You try to find an exit. You spot an archway, but a surge blocks it. You climb over benches slick with grime and spilled drink. Your hands slip. You feel splinters under nails. Therefore, every move costs pain. A man near you shouts that the emperor flees. Another shouts that the emperor stands firm. You don't know which is true. But the soldiers keep coming. Therefore, the only truth is still advancing. You see Hypatia vanish in the chaos, swallowed by bodies, by guards, by fate. No coronation speech reaches your ears. No royal promise touches your skin. Therefore, the new emperor dissolves into the same anonymity as everyone else. You press toward a wall, hoping stone gives support. But the stone reflects noise and traps heat. You hear sobbing, prayers, animal moans from people who cannot breathe. You smell urine as terror empties bladders. Therefore, dignity dies fast in a crush. A gap opens for half a second. You dive into it, scraping shoulder against stone. You wedge yourself sideways, ribs screaming. You feel the edge of a stair under your foot. Therefore, you gain 1 inch of elevation, and that inch feels like a kingdom. Another surge. You cling. You see a soldier's face close now, jaw tight, eyes flat. He does not look like a monster. He looks like a tool. Therefore, the horror feels colder, because it feels official. Steel flashes. You duck. The blade passes so close you feel air cut. Someone behind you takes it instead. A hot splash dots your neck. Therefore, luck becomes the only shield you own. You don't know if you witnessed the empire saved or the city murdered. The difference matters to philosophers, but your lungs demand air, not definitions. You push again, clawing toward an opening. Therefore, thought narrows into a single command: live. At last, a side passage appears, clogged, but not sealed. You shove, squeeze, scrape. You lose a piece of cloth. You feel skin tear on rough stone. But you spill through, coughing into darker air. Therefore, you escape the bowl, but not the consequence. Outside, the sound behind you remains like thunder trapped in a jar. You run until your legs shake. You lean against a wall and vomit blackened spit. You see smoke drift over rooftops that still burn. Therefore, the city above the massacre keeps dying too. Morning arrives like a tired guard. The light shows what night hides. You walk through streets that look scraped raw. Whole districts stand as black skeletons. Marble cracks. Charred beams point upward like accusing fingers. The air stays hot in places where stone should feel cold. Therefore, the riot does not end when shouting stops. You pass the ruin where Hagia Sophia stands, once a great holy shelter, now gutted, scarred, robbed of calm. You smell wet ash and melted wax. You hear quiet crying inside walls that still stand. Therefore, even God's house pays for human rage. The verdict arrives without ceremony. No trumpet explains it. No public trial asks your opinion. Justinian remains emperor. Hypatius is finished. You hear that the would-be ruler is seized, dragged, silenced. You do not see the final moment, but you feel its weight in the sudden caution of people who yesterday screamed Nika. Therefore, hope flips into fear with the same mouth. The factions change too. Blues and greens still exist, but their roar turns to a whisper. Some leaders vanish. Some appear suddenly wealthy, mouths shut. You see bribery in the way men avoid eye contact, in the way they touch new coins hidden in sleeves. Therefore, loyalty returns not through love, but through purchase. You step over broken tiles and find bodies carried away on doors used as stretchers. You smell lime and blood. You watch officials count damage like accountants counting debt. They measure walls, mark ruins, decide what gets rebuilt and what gets erased. Therefore, catastrophe becomes paperwork. But power never wastes a disaster. You hear talk of rebuilding bigger, brighter, louder. A new Hagia Sophia rises in conversation before it rises in stone. The plan sounds like a vow. The state resurrects itself like a god. Therefore, the people must believe the empire cannot be shaken. The city starts to move again, slow, wounded, obedient. You see workers hauling blocks. You hear hammers on stone. You smell fresh mortar mixing with old ash. Therefore, order returns, but it returns wearing scars. Now feel the sting of the lesson, because it does not stay in AD 532. Imagine a modern crowd in a modern arena. You see colors, slogans, rival chants. You feel belonging wrap around your chest like armor. But when belonging turns into one word, conquer, something changes. Therefore, community becomes a weapon when identity fuses with fury. You see how entertainment arenas act like pressure gauges. They gather frustration, pride, humiliation, hunger for meaning. Leaders watch those crowds the way sailors watch the sea. But if leaders misread the weather, the wave hits. Therefore, a stadium can become a tribunal in a single breath. You also see the other side. When rulers feel cornered, they may choose one decisive act of violence and name it restoring order. The word order sounds clean. But you smell what it costs: iron, sweat, smoke, crushed garlic, the sour stench of panic. Therefore, saving the state can mean slaughtering the city. The verdict of the Nika Inferno is not carved into a speech. It is carved into absence, missing neighbors, burned homes, a silence where chants used to live. The city survives, but it survives by learning fear again. Therefore, stability returns, but it returns on a mountain of bodies. So do you see the pattern today? When crowds believe a failed rope is prophecy, when rumor moves faster than truth, when leaders bargain with bribery 1 hour and steal the next, the same machine starts to turn. Therefore, the real danger is not a single angry man. It is 1,000 ordinary throats speaking as one. Imagine standing at the edge of that machine before it activates. You see the first torch raised. You feel your own voice warming up to join a chant. You don't know yet if the chant brings justice or brings fire. The legacy question burns in the mouth like smoke. When your crowd demands conquer, do you choose to shout or do you choose to step back, even if stepping back makes you stand alone?